anywhere. ProgressiveRadioNetwork.com, your home for news and information.
Hey, Lee.
Yeah, Jeff.
Your girlfriend gave another interview.
No, don't play it.
Listen to this.
I have a journalism degree. That is what I studied. I understand that this cornerstone of our democracy is a free press.
Shut it off! I said not to play it!
We are in the worst reality show in history.
Why won't she shut up?
You know she's going to be president, right?
Okay, stop it. That's not funny. That's not funny!
I think we should just go limp. Lay back. Maybe then the mama grizzly won't tear off your limbs. Cheater in the Rude. Thursdays, 8 p.m. Progressive Radio Network.
Hello, I'm Carol Brouillet, host of Community Currency, connecting people, ideas, important information, nurturing human renaissance, seeking to transform disintegrating empire into healthy, problem-solving, creative, evolutionary, peaceful communities. To hear us, listen every Thursdays, 5 to 6 p.m. on Progressive Radio Network.
Hi, I'm Allison Rose Levy. I've been a health journalist for 25 years. I'm currently blogging on the Huffington Post. After more than 2 decades of studying, talking about, exchanging, and reporting on integrative well-being and collective psychology, I think we're ready to step up to the next level. On Connect the Dots, we're going to reach beyond the merely individual look at health to look at the community, societal, and global level of what we need to address to better our health. Please join me Saturdays at noon Eastern Standard Time on the Progressive Radio Network, and I look forward to dialoguing with you.
I'm John Mueller from the Expat Files, Living in Latin America, where we discuss what it's really like to live, work, play, and or retire in Latin America. I want to tell you that my Monday night program has now moved to Tuesday at the same time, 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. But my Wednesday night program will remain the same, also at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And remember, you can email me about anything and everything concerning Latin America, theexpatfiles@gmail.com. Nos vemos.
The most news anywhere on the internet. ProgressiveRadioNetwork.com, your number one source for everything progressive.
Hello and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin. Here we are on Progressive Radio Network. Thanks for joining us again. Remember that you can go to Huffington Post for some of my articles on subjects ranging from holistic psychology to developing a green nation, sustainable and healthy, as well as to naturalnews.com. And please visit our website at www.abetterworld.net, where there is a weekly newsletter announcing the radio and the TV shows of every single week, and lots of other interesting articles and the like. So, I'm very glad you're joining us today because we're going to be speaking with two people who are the authors of a book called Climate Capitalism, Capitalism in the Age of Climate Change. Now, those of you who listen with any regularity know that this is one of our focal subjects, dealing with the environment and dealing with the interface of business with the environment. How business can reshape itself, basically redefine itself, so that it becomes, rather than the source of the biggest pollution and contamination of our planet, but become really the harbinger of sustainable practices, energy efficiency, and really carry the torch into the future for modeling the way we can be in some harmony with our planet, with natural resources, and still be profitable. In fact, even putting it that way misses the point, and become more profitable. And that very much is the point of the book Climate Capitalism, Capitalism in the Age of Climate Change by Hunter Lovins and Boyd Cohen. I've been enjoying the book immensely, and I'm very glad to share their work with all of you today. First, about Hunter Lovins. She was trained originally as a sociologist and lawyer and is currently on the faculty of the Bainbridge Graduate Institute. She is the president and founder of the Natural Capitalism Solutions group, essentially, which educates senior-level decision-makers in business, government, and civil society to restore and enhance the natural and human capital while increasing prosperity and quality of life. She has consulted to companies such as the International Finance Corporation, Royal Dutch Shell, Interface, Cliff Bar, and Walmart. She has also advised governmental agencies and organizations such as the Pentagon, the EPA, Department of Energy, numerous cities, governments of Jamaica, Australia, and, of course, the United States, and, interestingly, the Energy Minister of Afghanistan. It goes on and on. Her credentials are lengthy, including the Right Livelihood Award, the Lindbergh Award, and Leadership in Business. She was named the Time Magazine 2000 Hero of the Planet, and in 2009, Newsweek dubbed her a green business icon. So we're very glad to have Hunter on the show with us today. And her co-author is Dr. Boyd Cohen, PhD, climate strategist, who has been helping to lead communities, cities, and companies on the journey toward a low-carbon economy. He is the author of literally hundreds of articles on this subject, and again is very involved in this interface of business, profitability, and strategizing so that the output of companies or governments or cities, for that matter, can be utilized wisely and prudently to increase productivity and energy efficiency while becoming sustainable. So it's really a pleasure to have both of you on. I'd like to start with going beyond, first of all, the whole idea of whether there is climate change happening according to some or not. I think we can bypass that if one just pays a little bit of attention to recent weather patterns and noting the number of deaths that have happened and extreme weather patterns over the last many years, actually, and kind of leading up to this past year of 2010 and 11, we would really have not much to say about that. But in the midst of all that's going on, how is it that, Hunter, you are helping businesses see the light, so to speak, regarding the importance of energy efficiency and the principles and values of sustainability when they are so accustomed for decades and actually even centuries to pollute and do what is considered the easy way out?
Well, that's an interesting question. Business people, I've found, are not inherently evil. They don't wake up in the morning and say, my job today is to destroy the planet. They define their job as delivering value to owners. Milton Friedman said this is, I'll give you corporate social responsibility. It is to deliver value to owners. What we do is simply ask, what constitutes value to owners? Profitability, sure. Mm-hmm. And if you can cut waste out of a company, you will enhance profitability. A dollar saved goes directly to the bottom line. If you can increase the productivity of your people because you put them in a good green building. And we've shown that you can get 6 to 16% higher labor productivity when people can see better, have a living environment around them.
Breathe fresh air instead of circulated air.
Certainly, or air that is circulated in a way that delivers high-quality air to people.
Yes, yes.
You have higher labor productivity. Oh, and you're using less energy. Oh, and you're saving the climate. So the approach that Boyd and I took in this book is to say, right, assume climate change is a hoax.
Yes.
Don't go to Vegas on the odds of that being true, but if all you care about is being a profit-maximizing capitalist, you'll do the same thing you'd do if you were scared to death about climate change, because we now have the technologies at our hands to deliver higher profitability to business at the same time and in the same way that we are protecting the environment and enhancing quality of life for all of the people on the planet.
You know, that makes a lot of sense, great common sense and real bottom line sense. But before we kind of move forward into the exact work that you're doing with clients these days, I just want to pause for a moment, Hunter, and say, I was involved in this interface of business and environment, energy efficiency and the like back in the mid-'80s. And we made sense back then about how to save companies money by being more green. And they weren't paying any attention to it, even though it made sense to them financially. And it was so frustrating. Maybe I was too young to do it at the time. Maybe I was a whippersnapper. I don't know. But why is it? What accounts for the change? Because I would dare say it's a belief system rather than an actual, bottom line question. What is your experience of what accounts for the change? Because you and I and Boyd and others of our friends and colleagues have known for some 20 to 30 years about what we're saying now, but no one was listening.
Actually, people were listening a bit, and they were experimenting a bit. To some extent, the companies had to try this out. To some extent, we're having a generational shift. A lot of the younger leaders don't have the same mindset as those who were in power when it felt like we were beating our heads against the wall. And
yes.
To some extent, it still feels like we're beating our heads against the wall. But I think the real problem is our failure of capitalism. If in capitalism, technologies compete on their natural merits in a more or less unfettered market, we're a very long way from that. Around the world, the International Energy Agency reckons we spend at least $550 billion a year making the fossil technologies look cheaper than they really are.
In the form of
tax dollars.
In the form of subsidies,
These are direct subsidies paid in general to bring the cost of fossil energy down so that it looks cheaper to the consumer, and these do not count subsidies in the United States or in Europe.
Oh, my
These are
word.
primarily subsidies in the developing world. Jim Woolsey, who used to run the CIA, reckons that the subsidies in the United States run somewhere around $250 billion a year to the incumbent, largely fossil technologies. We don't know what the subsidies are in Europe because they don't want to talk about them, but suffice it to say they're high. So we're kidding ourselves. We have cheater capitalism, as Randy Hayes called it. And what we're suggesting in the book is that we just be better capitalists.
Yes.
We either let true market mechanisms function, or if we are really living in a world of corporate socialists, we at least have the sort of regulation that would approximate the outcome that you would get in a real market.
Yes, indeed.
And what we do is walk through 9 chapters of the good news about how even in this incredibly tilted playing field, this unequal market, the energy efficiency technologies, the renewable technologies, the more sustainable technologies are beginning to triumph.
Which ones
offer enormous entrepreneurial opportunity.
Before going into the subject of your particular clientele, which is so interesting, I mean, Walmart, Royal Dutch Shell, et al., what are those renewable technologies that you and Boyd reference primarily in this book and in your consulting work that you do? I'd like to hear first from you, Hunter, and then Boyd, if you'd please chime in.
Well, there are hundreds of such technologies that we chronicle in the book. My favorite are those that are based on the recognition that in nature, carbon is not the world's greatest poison. It's the building block of life.
Yes.
So companies like Calera out in California that spray seawater through the flue gas of a natural gas plant, soaking up almost 90% of the CO2 that would otherwise be emitted and turning it into a substitute for concrete, recognizing that this is the way that coral reefs build themselves, build limestone in seawater. Or Jeff Coates at Cornell, who has found a way to make plastic using carbon, using atmospheric carbon. And he says it's cheaper and it works better. Now, we chronicle the solar technologies, the biofuel technologies, ways of designing our cities so that we have higher quality of life and a dramatically lower use of imported oil, which, by the way, our country is now borrowing $1 billion every day to buy. Wonder why we have an economic crisis?
Not really, but I mean, basically the numbers that you were talking about just in terms of fossil fuel subsidies actually looks like a fossil fuel bailout. The numbers approach that, right? Yeah.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah. I mean, it's awesome. It's awesome. Boyd, what are some of the... Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. What is it that you favor in your work as you see the need for developing more renewable energies and what you find the business world is responding positively to?
Well, I think that one of the most important things about renewable energies is to understand that it's not one size fits all. What works in BC, where I'm based, which we're over about 90% of our energy supply is very green, it's from hydro. Not every community in the world has access to that amount of hydropower. So it depends on what community, what are the climatic conditions, what are the investment conditions, the scale of investments required. There's so many different factors. You know, there's run-of-the-river hydro, which is instead of full-scale hydro where you're damming up large rivers, you're basically doing low-impact renewable energy supply for local small communities. This is a common solution in a lot of the countries in Latin America where we work. Bioenergy works, as Hunter alluded to, but not in all capacities. Obviously, we've had a lot of debate in the U.S. about ethanol from corn. That's not a really sustainable solution, and it's not going to be around for very long. And in fact, I just read today that Congress is going to probably eliminate all remaining subsidies on ethanol, particularly from corn, and I actually support that. But there's new forms of bioenergy. There's something called torrefaction, which I'm very intrigued by, which is a way to essentially roast woody biomass. In a way, it's actually torrefaction. The word comes from torrefying coffee grounds for making coffee. So it's a technology that's existed for a long time, but long story short, it's a way to actually help communities that want to phase out coal-powered plants, and instead of putting coal in their boilers, they can put this torrefied wood product, which has a very similar calorific value, so it's almost the same energy strength or unit per production that you'd get out of coal, and yet it's a super clean solution. But again, that doesn't work everywhere. Like Europe doesn't have enough access to woody biomass, so they're importing it. I was doing some research on cities recently in terms of what cities are doing to generate more renewable energy locally. And for example, Paris has done some research and determined that they have a significant capacity to harness geothermal. In fact, they're working on a project underneath the Orly airport that's going to provide about 1/3 of all the energy requirement for the airport directly from geothermal located right below the airport. So it's going to depend on what location, scale of energy required, scale of consumption. Distributed energy works in a lot of places instead of traditional grid-delivered energy. I think we're going to see a mix of solutions. And we're also going to see, and I'm not sure Hunter might want to debate me on this, but I think we're going to see for a long period of time a transition out of fossil that will require us to go through gas for a while. And, there's a lot of debate about what role nuclear plays after Japan, but I think nuclear is probably going to play a role in some countries. UK hasn't abandoned it, although Germany's abandoning it, as an interim energy source to get us to the full renewable portfolio that we need to get to.
Yes, well, I hope that the work going on in Paris under the airport will tip off the French government about other options to nuclear power, since they are a leading faction in Europe for nuclear power. Germany, I heard, got the message after Fukushima, so maybe that good news will spread. One of the beautiful things about your book, both of you, is the good news, as you well put it before, Hunter. There really is a lot. I feel ached and pained by what I see with organizations such as ALEC, where corporations are writing legislation on behalf of their controlled legislators in Congress, and they have a first vote and probably a final vote long before and after the American people. And we see what's going on with our government, and there's a huge, it seems, disparity between the work that is going on the ground, and this is something I appreciated in your book, on the ground that you and Boyd are doing in Natural Capitalism Resources, your solutions, your organization, and what's going on politically. There's such a disconnect. On the one hand, the government is rolling back regulations as best they can, and it looks like the companies to whom you are consulting and advising don't really care much at all about regulations. They're seeing the economic capitalistic bottom line through your guidance, no doubt, and just going for it. Could you comment on that? Hunter, are you there?
Yeah, let me just quickly debate Boyd on the nuclear point. I'm more of a capitalist than he is.
Okay.
And let's let the market decide. New nukes will come on at a cost of at least 20 cents per kilowatt hour. Good efficiency comes on at 1/3 of a cent per kilowatt hour. Do the math. And this is why the Germans are moving away from nuclear, and why the Germans have moved so strongly into solar, using approaches like a feed-in tariff to get the production volumes up, so that by next year, solar will compete with grid electricity in Germany.
Excellent.
And they recognize that just the cost of building a new nuke is higher than the unsubsidized cost of solar, even in countries where they haven't gotten the costs down. So let's go with the cheaper supply technologies. Now, Boyd's right about the geothermal, but I really think we ought to let market mechanisms determine this. Now,
there's a new form of solar panels that I just heard about literally in the last several weeks that literally doubles its efficiency.
There are going to be so many breakthroughs now coming in solar. Organic solar, paint-on solar, flexible solar. This is, the U.S. military is moving to 100% renewably powered forward operating bases in places like Afghanistan. They realize that for every 24 convoys that come into the country, a Marine comes home in a body bag. Yes. Most of those convoys are hauling diesel. So let's enable the forward operating bases to power themselves using renewables. Oh, and that helps get the production volumes up. That helps get the cost down. And there are now more solar workers in the United States than there are steel workers.
Really?
Check out what China is doing. Rizhao, China, city of 3 million people, 99% have solar hot water on their homes. How many of you do?
God.
And that's why they recognize that if they get the volume of production up, the per unit cost comes down, and they're looking to export.
Absolutely.
Baoding, China, the young mayor woke up one morning to find that the lake that the city surrounded had died. The industrial toxins from the textile and auto industries had poisoned the lake. He said, polluting first and cleaning up later is very expensive. We're going green. He's recruiting renewable energy companies to come and locate in Baoding. It is now called China's Electronic Valley. It is the center of prosperity for that region of China. The Chinese will have a carbon trading market next year. As, by the way, will the Indians shortly thereafter, and then probably the Brazilians. Come on, U.S. Senate. Dig your heads out.
Yes, yes. I'm glad you brought that up, Hunter, about the carbon trading area. I'd like to hear you both comment on that, because the cap and trade, is that not, let me give my perhaps old-fashioned perspective. You two are on the cutting edge of this. To me, my understanding of that is the selling of carbon credits allows for companies that are major polluters, let's say coal companies, to continue their practices by buying carbon credits from companies that are really much more sustainable.
Sure. What it does is take a company like DuPont that 10 years ago more said, we're going to cut our greenhouse gas emissions 65% below our 1990 levels by 2010. Surprise, they did it. And between 2000 and 2005, they were saving $3 billion. By 2007, they were saving $2.2 billion a year and generating what would have been, if we had a market, carbon credits that they could then sell. Let the coal companies pollute. First of all, guess what? You're not going to be able to regulate them into not polluting.
Correct.
And raise the cost of that pollution because they now have to buy the carbon credits from the smart companies that are profiting because they are becoming more efficient, cutting their costs, and making money on the carbon credits. One of the reasons that I like carbon markets is that it financially rewards the innovators. It financially penalizes the stupid companies, and pretty quick the stupid companies go out of business.
I see. Of course, it's costing them more on their bottom line. They think maybe they ought to get with the program.
Precisely.
Yep.
Climate capitalism.
Yes, very good. Boyd, do you want to weigh in on that?
Well, sure, I'd like to. I run a company called CO2IMPACT, and we develop carbon offset projects in Latin America according to the United Nations, what's called the Clean Development Mechanism. And I think maybe I'll speak from the perspective first of the projects and the project owners that we work with in Latin America and the impacts these projects have on them. Mm-hmm. The Clean Development Mechanism from the United Nations, that's the primary cap and trade in the world right now, encourages clean development projects in the developing world while enabling more cost-effective purchasing of carbon offsets for countries that are under mandatory limits within the European Union. So we do projects. I'll give you one example of a project. We have a community in Huila, Colombia that has about 120 artisanal brick-making kilns that were all made by the families themselves in their backyards. Everyone in the family works in these kilns, from the children, instead of going to school, to the mothers and everyone else in between. They're exposed to high amounts of pollution and contaminants, which leads to a higher rate of respiratory disease and illness you find in the regular population. Our projects we have a project there where we're aggregating these independent brick makers into communities, cooperatives of brick makers, so we're helping them secure financing to acquire very energy-efficient kilns so that they can actually produce a higher quality brick at a lower cost because they have less fuel costs. In this case, in Colombia, they burn coal in their kilns, so you can imagine the carbon emissions associated with that industry and the pollution that the people that work in the kilns experience. So we're helping to reduce significantly the burning of coal in this industry, increasing their efficiency, increasing their quality of life, both from a health perspective and income perspective. And because of this increased efficiency, their children no longer have to work in the kilns. They can actually go to school.
Yes.
Okay, so that's one side of the equation in terms of the benefit of a carbon project. Then you have the country, the developed countryside perspective. So go back to Europe, say a German utility. Go back to a utility that burns coal in a coal burning power plant. the goal of a cap and trade system is to incent the transition to a more lower carbon economy, and to do it the most efficient way possible. And if the price of carbon is high enough, you will incent enough reductions locally. And one of the things Hunter and I clearly articulate in our chapter in the book on Climate Capitalism about carbon markets is neither her nor I nor anyone in the carbon markets advocate nor encourage nor enable companies to emit as much as they feel like doing and just pay the carbon costs for it.
Pay it off.
You have to start with efficiency and looking internally, but in some cases the cost for a company in Europe or North America perhaps to do a complete transition to zero carbon is a little bit too exorbitant at the moment. So they need to do as much as they can internally, and there's limits on how much of their emission reductions can be met. Their compliance targets can be met directly through carbon offsets. So they have to reduce first. But after they've reduced as much carbon as they feasibly can, then they go out to the carbon market. So again, it's a mechanism that incents companies to over time gradually reduce their emissions while at the same time generating all of these important benefits in the developing world.
Yes. Excellent. Excellent. Very good point. It's very interesting that you are embarking upon educating indigenous peoples in, I know, Bolivia and now Colombia about brick-making practices. We may often live by an assumption that indigenous ways are inherently more efficient and sustainable, but here's a case in point where that is simply not the case. So I guess you really would see a mix over time.
Absolutely. We're seeing our clients in Colombia, for example, we have some of these artisanal brick makers, as we discussed. We also have SMEs. One of our clients has an MBA from Cal Berkeley, but he's from Colombia, and he's aware of the cost to his business of the inefficiency.
SME is
a small, medium-sized enterprise, a smaller business, but he's not an artisanal. He's an educated professional with a real company and employees, and he's a formal operating business who pays corporate taxes and all that. But he's a small company in Colombia, and he's very well educated from the U.S., but he himself also recognizes we wasn't that aware necessarily before we talked to him about the emissions of component to his business, but he was very aware of the inefficiency in his process and that there were much more efficient kilns that he could acquire. And so the carbon markets enable us to help this client finance the cost of acquiring this new energy-efficient technology that were it not for the carbon markets, he wouldn't have the capital to actually make the investment.
Okay. I'm convinced. Thank you. I appreciate both of your input into that because I guess I felt concerned that it was giving license and latitude in areas that people could just, certain corporations were wealthy enough they could just buy it off. But you've both in your own ways shown me that that really isn't the case. I mean, it could be, but long-term economically, it's not wise. Even though they've indulged in this kind of behavior up till now, the tide is really changing. This is Mitchell J. Rabin. Let me just announce that we are on Progressive Radio Network. This is A Better World with Mitchell J. Rabin. We are speaking with the authors of Climate Capitalism, Capitalism in the Age of Climate Change, Hunter Lovins and Boyd Cohen. Yes, Hunter, please pick up.
I would truly hope that we would move toward the market mechanisms of carbon trading, but at least in the United States, it appears that we're not going to. A man named Peter Barnes has a proposal of a cap and dividend. You put a cap on the emission of carbon and, in effect, create costs to the companies to emit it. But rather than giving the proceeds to companies, you give it back to the U.S. people, in effect, as tax relief. That's an interesting proposal. There are many ways to approach this. I mean, I prefer those that regulate least. I'm a capitalist, but what's clear is that we need a price on carbon And this is what California went ahead and voted itself to have, what the Northeast has done with the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which, by the way, the proceeds from which have been paying some of the deficits for the states of New York and New Jersey. So it's sort of
interesting.
Stupid of the governor there to now be trying to opt out of it.
Yes.
So discover it's a very nice revenue mechanism. But what's clear is that this is as true for businesses on Main Street as it is for the bigger businesses. We've worked with a little company in California called Mi Rancho Tortillas. They had no earthly interest in sustainability, but they wanted to sell to Walmart.
Yes.
Walmart, as you may know, has put out its sustainability scorecard. 15 questions they want their suppliers to answer. Question number 1, have you measured your carbon footprint? So Joe Santana, the COO at Mi Rancho, came to us and said, what do I have to do? We helped Joe using a web-based learning tool that we've developed called Solutions at the Speed of Business that helps little businesses affordably get the same information that I charge a lot of money when I work with the larger corporations.
Yes.
And he's going to save $450,000 over the next couple of years through things like a lighting retrofit and more efficient ovens to bake his tortillas and just pure waste elimination.
Yes.
This makes him more profitable. It makes him able to increase his market share by selling to Walmart. If you'd have told me 6 years ago that Walmart would be the entity on the planet doing the most to drive sustainability, I don't bet to eat my hat. Here we are.
Definitely. You were anticipating my next question, which was I really wanted to ask you to tell the Walmart story because you are a consultant to them, and it is remarkable as the largest the largest company in the world are now really pioneering an organic and sustainable model that is remarkable. And you are actually the midwife, or certainly a midwife in this process. Tell us about Walmart.
I may have had a very small hand in it. My dear friend Ray Anderson, whom tragically we lost today,
oh no,
is probably really why Walmart went the direction it did. Ray Anderson of Interface.
Yes. Who is also a pioneer in this entire domain.
A true pioneer.
True.
And indeed, you said, why weren't we getting there in the 80s? Well, it's in part because we didn't have the business leaders like Ray telling the story to the business leaders like Rob Walton or Lee Scott at Walmart.
Yes.
And when business leaders started speaking to business leaders and say, hey, look, I'm making more money. Green is the color of money. This is just better business. That's, I think, when the tide started to shift.
Yes.
But what Interface helped Walmart realize is that
Interface, by the way, for the audience, is a modular carpet company, the largest, actually, that Ray Anderson, who had been a student, basically, of Paul Hawken, the Ecology of Commerce at Moore, got the light, saw the light about the wisdom of environmental green thinking many years back. Go ahead.
And Interface has a consulting group called Interface Rays. That worked with General Electric, which then came out with Ecomagination, with Walmart, which then came out with its historic announcement, with a number of other companies. Early on, I went down and talked to the whole senior management at Walmart, and I said, look, boys, fair enough. You're putting solar panels on your roof and selling organic underwear. But if you roam the planet rapaciously, exploiting people in developing countries and in communities here, so that people like me can throw away more junk, this is not sustainable.
Yes.
What would a truly sustainable Walmart business model be? And I held up a book titled How Walmart is Ruining America and the Rest of the World. And I said, this may come as a surprise to y'all, but you have critics. And I've been talking to them and asking them, what would a truly sustainable Walmart business model be?
Yes.
And some of them said, gone. But I said, not responsive. Walmart is. It is a reality that I think is going to persist. What would it be? So Michael Schumann, who wrote the book The Small Mart Revolution and is a pioneer in community economic development, said, well, that's an interesting question. Suppose that Walmart helped smaller local businesses by helping with credit card processing and purchasing. And then Michael Kleeman said, what if every time Walmart did a real estate development, they co-located small, local, sustainable businesses? And I said to Lee Scott, I looked him in the eye and I said, I don't know the answer to this question, but I think it is now what is before you. If you wish to retain brand equity, if you wish to remain as a company, you are going to answer this question. Now, is Walmart green? No, of course not. As Ray Anderson said in the future, industrialists like me will be in jail. Ray's epiphany was, there is nothing about interface that's sustainable. And he said, and we are going to be the first company of the next industrial revolution. What Ray realized, what Ray found at Interface was everything that he did contributed to shareholder value. Because it cut costs, it increased market share, it enhanced labor productivity. It was simply better business. And trust me, Walmart is not doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. They're making money at it.
Yes, yes. Now, have they incurred higher initial costs in taking the measures they're taking, Hunter, to go green in terms of energy efficiency, let's say LED lighting or going solar? And what is the amortization that a company would be looking at in these regards?
It obviously depends what your return on investment is going to be, but in general, these measures give you the highest ROI you'll get of any investment in the economy. For various retrofit measures on a building, you can get up to 50% return on investment. Now, many people say, oh, I have to have an 18-month payback. That's better than a 70% return on investment. You wouldn't demand that of any other investment in the economy.
Yes.
And yet, many of these retrofit measures can get you close to that. Well, in Walmart's case, sure, they invested some money and made it back very, very rapidly. They also, as Gary Hirschberg of Stonyfield says, use their efficiency gains to capitalize whatever investment they make in becoming even more efficient. Gary says efficiency is my venture capitalist.
Interesting. Interesting. Boyd, what are you seeing as the resistance of companies with which you deal when it comes, or cities for that matter, in our current climate, economic climate, to taking the next steps toward greening their businesses?
In Latin America, I would say, particularly in Colombia where we work, there's a pretty high level of receptivity if you can demonstrate ROI. Now, the average client, as I mentioned with my prior example, the average client isn't aware of their emissions. They're not in Latin America. They're not calculating them. They're not part of a cap and trade. They have no obligation to report on them, and they're not truthfully very concerned about it. So one of the things that we learned early on was we had to change our messaging, because my company, CO2IMPACT, was focused on reducing emissions from projects in Latin America. And so our whole messaging, our marketing message when we spoke with clients was we could help you reduce your emissions and monetize that through the carbon markets. And what we discovered is that's not the messaging that works with them. Obviously, it's pretty obvious in hindsight that would make sense, that what they care about is, their business, and their business is not reducing emissions. Their business is producing something. And in the case of many of our clients, it happens to be producing bricks.
Sure.
And so we had to focus on the business value for doing the projects with us. And so in the case of energy efficiency, it came down to simply educating them on the existing new technologies that are emerging and the increased efficiencies that would result from that, and to show them the ROI from that. And of course, the carbon offsets contribute to the ROI and accelerate the payback period. So that's in Latin America with a private sector client. I'm flying down to a city in Ecuador early September who's invited me down to speak with them about how they could adopt some of the practices in Vancouver with respect to renewable energy and adapt them, of course, to their local environment. At the city level, if you look at the world, which I recently did a lot of research on what the best global cities in the world are doing on climate change, both from reducing their own emissions and also from preparing to adapt to a changing climate in their communities. We're finding the leading cities, not very many of them in North America, to be honest, although we do have a lot of cities in the U.S. that are at least paying lip service to managing their emissions and are part of the U.S. Conference of Mayors Climate Protection Agreement. But, of course, in this economy, a lot of the cities in the U.S. and beyond are not seeing the connection between low carbon and increasing their job and economic growth locally. And so they're seeing that maybe now isn't the time to invest in renewables and efficiency, whereas I think Hunter and I would very much agree that one of the things we're missing, and in fact I just wrote a post that's probably going to go live in a day or two on Triple Pundit about how I really think despite some of the short-term credit issues that Europe has as well, they're so much better positioned for the medium and long term because they've already made a lot of investments in their public transit system, identifying their cities in renewables, and U.S. and North American cities have been resistant. And if you look at, of course, at a federal level, what I'm hearing, and I think you may have heard the same, that what's emerged from this debacle of the debt crisis in the U.S. is, of course, a commitment to reduce costs and not add any revenue. And what I'm hearing is at a federal level, they're looking at reducing the power of the EPA, taking budget away from them, and eliminating some of the incentives that were being planned to encourage investment in R&D for renewables.
Yes.
So we see a unfortunate disconnect between the reality of in making investments that have these returns that Hunter's talking about, whether it be in the private or the public sector. We're seeing a disconnect between a recognition that investments in those things will actually pay significant dividends in our cities, will lead to job growth and a longer-term economic growth in our communities.
Yes, indeed. There is. I think that the United States of America and its Congress are really preparing to go back to the days of the Flintstones. You know, it's a very tough situation. From the point of view of jobs, Hunter Lovins, what do you see already having happened in the United States relative to the green sector? Everybody is up in arms about jobs, jobs, jobs. It's the leitmotif of our current Congress and administration. And nobody looks to the green sector for job growth. Yet you made an astounding point before that there are more people working in solar in the United States today than in steel. What else in that area should we know about?
The green jobs are really the only class of jobs that are growing in the United States, and they have an enormous potential to put Americans to work in our communities, doing what's needed, enhancing quality of life, and delivering to Americans high-quality, high-paying manufacturing jobs. For example, in Sonoma County in California, they put in place a mechanism called PACE financing, property-assessed clean energy. The county floated a bond, put together a pool of money that enabled small businesses and citizens to get the financing to implement energy efficiency in their homes and businesses, put solar on their roofs. Within the first 9 months of the program, from January of 2009 to September of 2009, when a study was done by a local university, construction jobs in Sonoma County went up 8.4%. In immediately adjacent Napa County that did not have this program, jobs went down 3%. If we want to get the construction industry back to work, let's fix up our buildings. Yes. This is not rocket science. If you're going to fix up a building, you're not going to put it on a boat and send it to China. These will be jobs in our communities. When you fix up the building, the people living in the building have lower energy costs, so we don't have to borrow as much to buy as much. You also have a more resilient community. You have a higher quality of life. Oh, and you are helping to save the climate. We know how to create jobs. Then those paragons of financial rectitude, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, effectively outlawed PACE financing. Communities across the country were set to put this into operation, and Fannie and Freddie nixed it. The bill has just been introduced in the House of Representatives to ban Fannie and Freddie from banning PACE financing, and it's a very good thing. If people want something that they personally can do, call your congressman and ask them to support PACE financing. Now, there's another policy measure that...
Our government at work.
Our government at work. Our corporatocracy at work.
Yes, indeed.
There's another measure that would do a lot of good. The Germans already have this in place, and it's called a clean contract. What it says is that the local utility will pay you a fair price for any green electron, anything generated by solar or wind or any of the other renewable energy. This is why Germany is in the prosperous situation that it is now. It implemented this program 4 or 5 years ago. As a result of the program, the price of solar will compete with grid electricity next year. Now, people say, but that costs more if you're paying more for green electrons. Yes, it does. A study by Deutsche Bank found that the Germans are now paying something like 8.6 billion euro more than they had been before the program went in place over the 4 years of the program. However, the study also found that had they done nothing, had they just continued to burn coal, Germans would have paid 9.3 billion euro more, i.e., costs will rise. They will rise less. You will have lower overall costs with these feed-in tariffs, these clean contracts, than you would have if you just had business as usual. And Germany has more solar workers than it has steel workers. And Germany is now the country that's in a position to be bailing out the pigs' economies because Germany has focused on the job creation potential of the clean economy. How about we do this at home?
Right. It is, the politicians are completely in business for themselves, unfortunately, and you used the correct word before, Hunter, corporatocracy. This government is a matter of puppets. And
governments do what you allow them to do. You are what you tolerate.
Yes.
It's time for the American people. I sympathize with the Tea Party. I have many friends who are Tea Partiers. I'm pissed as hell.
If only they'd serve some better tea, I think I'd be a lot happier.
Let's organize as they are in Wisconsin. Let's take our government back.
Yes. The premise of taking our government back, I think, is a sound one. Cutting our social programs into ribbons is another story that I don't want to take our precious few more minutes with. But I do want to ask you this. I want to set something in context. The two of you and many other green consultants, pioneers like Amory, Lovins, like Bill McKibben, like many others who are doing excellent work to advance the agenda of green thinking and sustainability, even though it is a small minority overall. A lot of good work is being done, profound work, in fact, and I am so grateful to have the two of you on today to share with us some of the incredibly sexy results on the bottom line, and on the triple bottom lines, by the way, that are being seen through a lot of your efforts. From the point of view of the 360 parts per million perspective, how do you see the work taking place and even the advances being made inside Walmart, DuPont, Royal Dutch Shell, and others, government cities around the world, relate to the dropping of the overall global carbon footprint by the time we need it to happen before we hit that tipping point?
We're too late. Now, people like Dr. Jim Lovelock, the UK scientist, say Gaia principle, says we are really too late.
Mm-hmm.
Jim says that civilization as we know it is gone for 100,000 years. I think Jim's wrong, and I think it's our job to prove him wrong. But we're way above 350 parts per million now. We're at 394 last I heard, and rising rapidly. Wonder why it's hot out there?
Yeah.
Conversely, wonder why it was super cold last winter. Both of those are entirely in line with the climate scientists saying we're going to have, a better phrase than global warming is global weirding.
Yes, Boyd told me that earlier. Global weirding, all right, yes.
Yeah, and get ready for a lot more of it. Sorry, Rick Perry, praying's not going to get you the rain you need in Texas. A hurricane might, and we're slated to have a more violent hurricane.
So on one hand, we're too late on the from one point of view and from a numbers point of view, but on another hand, you're saying
we can get there if we do what is manifestly in our economic interest. We will go well above the sustainable limit of carbon emissions, but then we can come back down below it.
Mm-hmm.
And the Earth is amazingly
flexible,
able to restore itself.
Yes.
Give it half a chance.
Oh, boy.
Now, Boyd rightly demanded that we have a chapter in the book on adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
It is too late only to mitigate our way out. We are also going to have to do adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
And as the presidential science advisor, Dr. John Holdren, said, we will mitigate, adapt, and suffer. The relative ratios depend on how good we are at the first two.
Yes, yes. Wonderful.
But again, in adaptation, there are many, many profitable ways to help communities get ready for extreme heat waves, for violent storms, for flooding, for all of the nasty impacts of climate change in ways that create jobs, that are profitable, that drive the creation of new companies. So we have a whole chapter on the opportunities in that.
Wonderful.
And then the last chapter is, all kidding aside, folks, climate change is very real. It's serious, it's upon us, and we are going to have to wholly rethink our economy.
Yes.
Because the economy we have now isn't working, and if you don't believe me, just look at the stock market.
Not paying attention. Exactly. Thank you very much. My last question, unfortunately, we're just about on the edge of time here. Boyd, I'd just like to ask a question in light of all of this. I had two main questions. One was that to Hunter. The other is about food production. In light of global weirding and extreme weather patterns, what do you see as the prospect of dealing with very difficult food issues over the next 10 years, 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, food issues are going to be one of the most important topics we can address over the next decade and beyond, all because of, or at least partially exacerbated by, climate change. And also we have a whole chapter in the book on agriculture and what opportunities exist now profitably to make the transition to low carbon. And a lot of those low carbon food solutions include, obviously, local food solutions.
Yes.
The average food basket we have travels 2,500 to 3,000 miles to get to our plate, and there's all kinds of cool business opportunities for companies to develop localized food solutions, and that's what we're going to have to do. We may not all be able to eat a banana in February in every part of the world. We may, over time, see a transition of localized food that actually grows in your community all year round. Obviously, as oil prices continue to climb, as our transportation network continues to be overly dependent on fossil fuels, we're going to have to change some of our habits, and we're also going to have to change our food system, move away from chemicals and pesticides to localized organic food. There's ideas like vertical gardens, which are already existing in some communities. There's a really cool solution that I came across very recently. It's a company called, I want to say it's called Bright Farms.
10 seconds to tell us.
Bright Farms, instead of bringing your lettuce from 2,000 miles away to sell it in the grocery store, you harvest it on the rooftop of the grocery store through this company, Bright Farms. It rents the space from the grocery store itself.
Wonderful.
And don't transport anymore. They drop it right down the elevator.
Wonderful. Well, listen, I want to just thank you both for this wonderful book, Climate Capitalism, Capitalism in the Age of Climate Change. Hunter Lovins and Boyd Cohen. I think this is only part one of several parts, if you're willing to come back on.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Hunter Lovins and Boyd Cohen, for your good work. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. Visit us at our website, www.abetterworld.net. The book will be available there as well, and you can learn more about our guests today. I look forward to seeing you all next week.
You are listening to the Progressive Radio Network, your source for news and information.
I'm John Mueller from the Expat Files, living in Latin America, where we discuss what it's really like to live, work, play, and or retire in Latin America. I want to tell you that my Monday night program has now moved to Tuesday at the same time, 8 o'clock.